Hey sightseers, it's Sightseeing Sally. I'm with Meandering Marty today, and we're checking out
Good Springs, Nevada.
And where is Good Springs, Marty? Meandering Marty?
Somewhere near Las Vegas. I just drove here.
You should know where. If you were the one driving, you should know.
Somewhere near Jean, Nevada.
Jean, Nevada,
Yeah,
yes.
Jean, Nevada.
It's probably about 30 minutes, depending on where you are in Vegas and traffic and all that. And so this isn't a forgotten town because I think a lot of people know Good Springs, but we came out here to check it out because it's an old mining town with a lot of historic buildings.
Yeah, you really got to check this out. There's a lot of cool stuff here to see.
Starting out here, we're actually standing in front of where the old General Mercantile used to sit, and you can see that there are some old rail cars or mining ore cars, more specifically, that have been set up here, along with an old windmill and a water tank that the windmill probably used to fill at one point. And then you can see from this angle they have the remnants of an old wagon. Apparently at one time the buildings on the site housed the offices of Jensen and Crampton. They were surveyors and assayers, and Justice of the Peace Phil Springer. Then in 1920, an Otto Schwartz bought the property and established a mercantile here. Schwartz Mercantile, that is. He operated the store until 1934, at which point he sold off the stock and then began investing in mining properties. His widow Cora occupied their home that used to be here until the 80s when it burned down. And that's the story of the Schwartz Mercantile. For those interested, you can access biographies on Otto and Cora at goodsprings.org. At least according to my little handy-dandy walking tour guide. Yep, they've got a nice little walking tour here in town and a website where you can access more in-depth information on the townsfolk and the historic sites here in town.
Looky, looky. Here we go again. Another old siren. Now, if anybody out there knows where I can find one at a poor YouTuber's price, I'd be interested in one. Drive Sally crazy.
You sure you want to drive me nuts?
Absolutely. Allegedly.
Moving on. I believe there will be a historical marker over at this point here where you can see the concrete. Yep. Oh, that wasn't what I expected it to read. I actually thought this was going to be the site of the original spring, which the town gets its name from, Good Spring, or Good Springs. But rather, this marks a section of the old Spanish Trail that ran between 1829 and 1848. Well, based on all the shrubs and bushes, there's got to be a spring around here somewhere, or at least a marker for it. Let's keep moving on and see if we can find it. Oh, I think we've just found it. There it is. The marker I thought I was going to. Says Good Spring. In a nutshell, there was an artesian spring that used to bubble up here to the surface. Originally discovered and used by the Native Americans, later a man by the name of Joe Good, who was a cattleman and a miner, he used the spring, and that's how the spring got its name and the town, because it was known as Good's Spring. Now, if you take about 20 steps or so, you're going to come across this cabin here. It's known as the Cottonwood Cabin. I'll give you one guess, sightseers, as to why it's known as the Cottonwood Cabin. Give up? It's because of the cottonwood tree, of course. But that's not the only interesting thing about this cabin. Apparently there used to be a store here, and inside you'll find that the walls are lined with old newspapers. And when I say old, I mean old. They're from the Good Springs Gazette, which only ran between the years of 1916 and 1921. Though you'll have to take my word for it, sightseers, there's no legitimate way for us to go inside and verify that. Moving on, since Marty's off in the truck, taking a break, hanging out with the dogs, I thought I would put on the old Marty thinking cap and point out a few things that I know Marty would find interesting. First off, you can see back here, they've got a couple of old tanks and a windmill hanging out. And then beyond the old ore cars, you've got some sort of lifting mechanism here. Might have been used with the mining that was going on here. Or maybe not. Maybe it was used for lifting heavy stuff in the yard. Anyways, you can see there underneath the speed limit sign is a sign saying end school zone. An interesting thing to know about Good Springs School, their elementary school, which by the way is still in use today, is that it's on the National Register of Historic Places and that it still has its original bell in the bell tower dating back to 1913. Imagine that, going to school in a building that's on the National Register of Historic Places. How cool is that? Personally, I find that amazing. My schools, and I probably mentioned this if you saw the video that I did on my hometown, but the school I went to, elementary school, and my high school, and interestingly enough, one of the schools that I went to for college, they've all been torn down, gone, leveled, other things put up in its place, or in their place, and all the history's gone. So when I come here and see something like that, as an adult, I can truly appreciate the significance of that, and I just find it amazing. As I mentioned earlier, Good Springs is an old mining town, but that's not its only claim to fame. We'll get into that a little bit later when we head over to the Pioneer Saloon. First, let's explore a little bit more about the mining that went on here. Mining in this area didn't begin until 1856, when the Mormons developed a single lead mine at Potosi, likely the oldest lode mine in Nevada. Though there were small amounts of gold, silver, copper, and other minerals that were removed, mostly lead and zinc were mined here. In total, about $25 million worth of ore was taken from the earth in this district between the years of 1856 and 1957. Pretty fascinating, huh? Some of the minerals that they had found here, like the molybdenum and vanadium, I'm probably not pronouncing those correctly, but you can correct me in the comment section below, I had never heard of before until today. Guess I should have paid a little bit closer attention in my science classes. Next up, the Good Springs Community Club. Despite its plain exterior, this building has more history attributed to it than some of you young whippersnappers watching this video. Originally built and used as a barracks at the Tonopah Army Airfield, the Good Springs Improvement Association obtained the building and moved it 250 miles to this location in 1949. This old building has seen it all, from pilots in their skivvies to town business meetings, potluck dinners, bingo, raffles, birthday parties. It's even served the town as a polling place during elections. Now here's a really interesting section of town over at the corner of West Spring Street and North Revere Street. You've got what I believe are a couple of old mining shacks sitting here, and what appears to be an old privy sandwiched between the two of them. I think it goes without saying, but I'm going to mention it anyways, just in case, and that is all the buildings that we've been looking at thus far are on private property, which means should you come out to Good Springs and want to do some of your own exploring, you can do so as long as you're doing it from the public right-of-way. In other words, standing on the street. Do you see that stone building off in the distance there? Here, let me zoom in on it for you. What's interesting to note about this building, sightseers, is that it is the oldest building in town and one of the oldest buildings in all of the county. Built in 1886 by wealthy Utah mining investor and promoter A.G. Campbell, this is a simple structure made of dry-laid rocks. Okay, sightseers, I'll be the first to admit I have no idea what a dry-laid rock is. But if I had to guess, I would assume that means that there wasn't any sort of mortar placed in between the rocks, that the rocks were just stacked one on top of another in a way that was able to create this structure without it toppling over. But rather than just assume, and given I know somebody who may know the answer, let's go ask Marty and see what he has to say. Meandering Marty, do you by chance know what it means when something is constructed dry-laid rock was the terminology?
Now, I would assume that probably means they found rocks and then stacked them in walls by fitting them together, by kind of like putting them together with a jigsaw puzzle, is what I would think.
Do you mean like without any mortar placed in between the rocks?
Yeah, kind of like when they build stone walls out by where we live out of rocks that are in the field, you know, field rocks.
Fieldstone.
Yeah, but probably when they build houses and all that stuff or cabins out here, they're probably stacking 2 rows of it, one next to one another, because obviously you get some crazy winds out here. I mean, I can't see just one wall fitting together, holding up to heavy winds. Probably got 2 walls, maybe something in between there.
So not too far off from what I thought, sightseers. Let's give me a thumbs up for getting it right. Moving on to our next stop. Something that caught Marty's eye because of his interest in radios and creating his own radio station.
Among many things I always wanted to do, I always wanted to do a radio station. And this is one of them here. To me, this is an unlicensed radio station, which it's legal because it falls under the Part 15. I like that K-Ghost. You can look inside, you can actually see where they're transmitting from and DJing from. It ain't too bright and you can see in there.
Ah, there's a bit of a glare. Too bad we couldn't get an on-air interview with Sightseeing Sally and Meandering Marty. Before we head on over to the Pioneer Saloon, I wanted to stop and show you where the Good Springs Museum is. As you can see, they're currently closed. It's the middle of the week and they're open on weekends. What I wanted to point out about the museum is that this used to be the building where the post office was, except it wasn't here that it did the mail. It was in a different spot in town. It got moved here to its present location in 1990, if I remember correctly, by a man of the name Coyote Don. For a little museum, it's quite interesting. We did stop on a weekend, by the way, and got to see some of the old post office boxes that are in there, plus some of the other artifacts that they've collected from town. Mainly photographs, but those are priceless when it comes to depicting the history of the town. Well, Marty, should we head on over to the saloon?
Sure, we can get some adult Kool-Aid.
That's one that I've never heard before, but Marty always comes up with some interesting ways to describe things. Yeah, let's go get some adult Kool-Aid, Marty.
Yep.
Well, there we go. We're at the Pioneer Saloon, and you can see off to the left, well actually if you're standing in front of it facing the road it would be to the right, but it's the Good Springs General Store that we're looking at there.
There's a marker there.
Oh. Yeah, we'll go walk over by the marker. In general, the marker talks about George Vail, the man who built the Pioneer Saloon, a hotel that no longer exists, and the general store building you see here. We now come to the town's other claim to fame, the one that resulted after the fateful day of January 16th, 1942. This is the saloon where Clark Gable sat for several days at the bar waiting on news of his wife, Carol Lombard. Carol and her mother had been on a plane, along with many others, that ended up crashing into a mountain, the Double Deal Mountain, in January of 1942. In hopes of a miracle, Clark sat at the bar, waiting on news of the survival of his beloved wife. As we all know, though, fate had other plans. Well, why don't we go on inside and maybe grab a bite to eat or something? Apparently, there's a piece of the wreckage inside, a hunk of metal that was retrieved. All right. Oh, wow. Check that out. Now, normally, I don't make my way into the men's room because there are things in there I don't want to see. But Marty said that there's something here in the men's room I have to see. So hopefully I won't need bleach for my eyes afterwards.
Let's go.
This feels a little bit creepy. I'm just saying.
Check out the urinal.
Okay. Oh.
It looks like a sink.
Yes, it does. That's rather interesting. Not sure how I feel about that.
Let's go.
We're now over in the Good Springs Cemetery. You can see some of the tokens that people have left here indicating that they visited the cemetery. You have a pin that says I am loved, money, piece of fool's gold right there, little rubber ducky, oh, Cayman Jack, a bottle top from Cayman Jack, and a couple of shell casings, among other things. Apparently the Robbins family donated the land here for the residents, the honest-to-goodness residents of Good Springs, to be buried here. The oldest marker in the cemetery dates back to 1890 when Anna Nimmer passed away. If I understand correctly, she was the first person to have been buried here. Let's see if we can find her grave marker. I haven't seen Anna's grave yet, but over here, right directly in front of me, is the Vail family plot. If you didn't know, George Vail controlled most of the business interests in both Good Springs and Jean, which is the town that's right off of I-15. Jean, by the way, was named after his wife, Jean Vail. And that would have been in the early teens of the 1900s. These two graves look fairly old with the crosses, the wooden crosses that are here. Trying to read it, even zoomed in, it's difficult. Well, looky here. I think we found Anna's grave. Right here. Yes, it's Anna Nimmer. July 17th, 1869, December 27th, 1890. December, you'd be hard-pressed to be able to bury somebody back in Wisconsin during that time.